Hello all, welcome to part 19 of the SecurityTube Metasploit Framework Expert course and certification. In this video, we will look at how to add new DLL support to Railgun to extend its functionality either at runtime or basically by adding that support upfront to the definition files. So this video is part of the SecurityTube Metasploit Framework Expert course and certification. Please visit securitytube.net/SMFE for more details on how to enroll. The SecurityTube certifications are currently being taken by students from over 30 plus countries around the world. And this video is made freely available as our vision and commitment towards free InfoSec education for one and all. Now, before you begin on how to add new DLLs to Railgun, the first question, of course, you would ask is, how do I even know the existing list of DLLs? Now, in order to do that, let's first go ahead and break into our Windows machine using the Net API exploit. And once we've broken in, what we are going to do is go into IRB mode. There you go, we have our Mpr.dll session. So here we are inside IRB. And once inside IRB, let's run client.railgun.known DLL names. So now we can see the existing list of DLLs which are out there. And here is what I'm going to do. If you want to statically figure out what's been added, just do a locate on Railgun, just like in the previous video. And let's quickly change directory to railgun.def. Use it but low volume. And there you go, right? And if you notice, we basically have around 10 DLLs which are here, all of which have a definition file and have been defined. And as we've seen in previous videos, just because there is a definition file for the DLL does not mean all the functions in that DLL have been mapped, right? And we also saw how to map additional functions into these DLLs. Now, let's go ahead and take up the next task, which is we know that we have a list of existing DLLs, and now we probably want to go ahead and add a new DLL definition either on the fly or add it permanently to the framework by defining a definition file. Now, basically the whole idea really is that generally it's not a great idea to add DLL definitions on the fly unless it is absolutely required to do so. Simply because the framework has a lot of interesting and powerful features such as caching, which you cannot avail of if you go ahead and do runtime definition of DLLs. Again, this would not be available across sessions, which means you would have to add the runtime DLL to every existing session, right? A lot of work. So, however, in this video, I'll show you how to do both tasks, which is add a runtime DLL definition, as well as how do you create a new definition file and add it permanently to the framework. So here is what I'm going to do. I've picked up a DLL called Mpr.dll. And if you remember the list of DLLs already present in Metasploit Railgun, this wasn't included. Now, there is an interesting function here called WNetGetUser, which basically can give you the current users in which context you're running, right? This is similar to the getUID command which you run after you break into a session. But there are, of course, a million ways of doing the same thing. Okay, so how do we go ahead and add a runtime definition for this DLL? There are a couple of things you should first look at. First is the definition of the function itself, right? It returns a D word. You have an in parameter LP name, which in our case, if the parameter is null, the system returns the name of the current user for the process. This is exactly what we want, which means the first parameter for us is null. The second parameter is an out parameter, which is a pointer to a buffer which receives the null terminated username, right? Fantastic. And the last one is an in-out param, which basically is a pointer to a variable which specifies the size of the LP username buffer, which we basically pass as the second argument. Now you have two flavors of this function. One is WNetGetUser W, which is for Unicode, and the other, which is user A, which is for ANSI. Very important thing here, the minimum supported client is Windows 2000 Professional, right? Which means Windows 98 does not have this function. However, Windows XP and above have this function. At the very same time, minimum supported server is 2000, right? This is the header file if you want to do regular C programming, and here is the DLL file, which is Mpr.dll. So the first thing we need to do is first add the DLL at runtime. So this is part A, where we look at how to add a runtime DLL. We can do this by calling client.railgun.addDLL, right? So let's go ahead and do this. So here you go, client.railgun.addDLL. The name of our DLL is Mpr, and then we go ahead and give the location of the DLL. Now this is a DLL which ships with Windows, right? So it's, in our case right now, it's Windows System 32, and then you have Mpr.dll. Now, if you were curious, you could go to the Windows system and actually use a utility like DLL Export Viewer from Nersoft and look at the DLL, right? And these are all the exported functions from the DLL. The one which we are interested is this, right? Which is WNetGetUser and the Unicode form. Let's get back. Okay, so once you run this, right, you should see a little trace back on the screen, a bunch of stuff which is happening in the background. Right, takes a bit. And now, if you basically go ahead and do known DLL names, you would actually see that Mpr has been added in the end. Right? Can you see that? Here it is. Now, it doesn't end here, because if you remember in the previous video, what we now also have to do at runtime is to add the function definition which we want to invoke inside Mpr.dll, right? And what is the function which we are interested in? Well, we are interested in WNetGetUser, which gives us the current user in whose context the process is running. Now, this is similar to what we did in the previous video using add function. So let's go ahead and call client.railgun.add function, and basically the DLL in which we are interested is Mpr, and the function name we are interested in is WNetGetUser and the Unicode form. So we have WNet. Make sure you take care of all the caps, right? The return value is of course a D word, and then you have an array of arguments which you're going to pass the function. If you remember the definition we saw, there were 3 arguments to this function call. Now basically what I have done is I've taken all of those 3 arguments which we talked about in the previous slide. The first one is basically LP name, which is an in param. So you could actually go ahead and write char, we have LP name, and this is basically an in param, right? The next one is, if we go back to the slide, is LP username, right? This is the username which is going to be returned to us. So let's go back here, and this is an out param, keep that in mind. So you have LP username, and this is an out param, right? Finally, what we have is an in-out param, if you remember from the function definition, and that is the LPN length, right? The length of the buffer which we are passing as LP username. So let's just call it len, and this is going to be a PD word because it's a pointer to an argument which contains the length, right? So here we go. We have the LP len, and this is an in-out param. But just notice the way I've written in-out, and everything looks fine. So if all goes well, we should actually see that the function definition has now been added, right? Now, if you remember the previous video, exactly the same. Now, if I want to invoke this function, I'm just going to call railgun, and then basically Mpr, and then you have WNetGetUser W. The first argument was null, which is nil, simply because we want the current username. The second one was a pointer to a buffer. Now, in the case of railgun, we know that we need to mention the size of the variable so that railgun can take care of all the memory allocation. Let's say the size is 50. And the third case, when you pass a PD word, basically what happens is we need to pass the length or the value which is going to be stored there. Again, railgun takes care of everything. So what we pass in is 50, right, which is the length of the buffer which we pass as argument 2. So there you go. And if you notice, the function ran, and here it is. We are running as system. Fantastic, right? So this is how at runtime we have added a new DLL to Railgun's functionality, added a function within that DLL, and then called it, right? Imagine the power. You could actually ship your own custom DLLs at runtime, add the function definitions again at runtime, and call them on the victim system. The best part is everything is happening in memory and the disk is not touched, and hence no intrusion detection or an antivirus is going to complain about it, right? Just as an example, if we go ahead and migrate to a process with a different username, so let's say I migrate into explorer.exe, which is running under the username SecurityTube, right? And then if we do the exact same sequence, which is let's go into IRB, and at that point, let me just go ahead and look at known DLL names, right? If you notice, Mpr is not added, right? Simply because it was a runtime addition. So we need to add this every single time. Painful, really painful. And this is the reason why the whole idea basically is to go ahead and add the DLL as a static definition. So what we're going to do is client.railgun.add DLL, and we simply going to say mpr C drive Windows system32, and then we have mpr.dll, right? So we've added the DLL. You should see that whole long full space bag of yours, which is there. I wish I had saved the whole string which I had to type in. Unfortunately, I was foolish enough not to do that. So just copy this thing from the presentation, because that way it's going to be a little faster than me typing everything in. right? So let's go back here. Now I'm going to add the function definition, right? This is basically, and then what we are going to do is add the individual arguments to the function. So here goes. Again, let me just very quickly go ahead and make these additions. I'm not kind of typing the names again, just using A, B, and C instead. It's going to be a bit more faster. Right? Oops. Looks like I should have stuck to what I did previously. Okay. So here goes. Known DLL names, fantastic. Mpr is already loaded. And now what I'm going to do is just kind of go back here, add WNetGetUser, and then again simply run the command which I ran previously, right, just before migrate and quit, which is this. And what you would see right now is the username returned is SecurityTube. Fantastic, right? However, the story doesn't end here. Why? Because still now what we have done is runtime support. Now, what if you want to go ahead and add the DL definition ahead of time? So let's go ahead and do this for this DLL and the function along with it, right? So let's quit Metasploit altogether, right? Exit everything. Go back to our definition folder and copy one of the definition files, right? I'll probably use the net API 32 and def underscore now the name of the DLL, which was Mpr.rb, right? Now let me open up Mpr.rb and just quickly go ahead and make changes and replace net API 32 with Mpr.rb. Sorry, just Mpr. Same goes here. There you go. And then let's just delete all these functions we don't need. Right, and now let's go ahead and add the function we want to use, which is WNetGetUser W. I think I made a mistake somewhere here. Let's just go back and revisit the function name once again. WNetGetUser W. Yes, that is what it is. Okay, right, and the first option, if you remember, from our definition file, basically was the LP name, LP username, and LP length. So let's just go here, LP name, this is username, which is what it is. This is an out parameter. And finally, we need to add the last parameter, which was basically PD word, nothing but LP length, and this was an in-out parameter, right? Fantastic. So now if you compare the definition here and the one which we have up there, you would see that both of them are entirely identical. Okay. Now, one of the other things which you need to do is open railgun.rb and add this to the list of built-in DLLs. That's the only way Metasploit is going to pick this up, when it kind of starts Railgun. So just a quick check. Everything seems to be in order. Let's go back. So railgun.rb is one directory up. There you go, railgun.rb. Let's go down, and just after WLAN API, which is one of my favorites because I'm a wireless hacker, let's go ahead and add Mpr. Okay, fantastic. Now let's restart the framework. Okay, So what would happen at this point is that when we run Railgun, Mpr.dll is going to be part of the preloaded DLLs. And the WNetGetUser W function call will be also available to us as soon as this we load Railgun, and we can use it without having to worry about, should we add it, not add it, and all of that. In my experience, this is extremely handy if you want to ship third-party DLLs to the victim machine and do interesting stuff with it, right? Okay, this is going to be a long wait, like always, for MSF console to load. That's simply because probably I'm running it in a VM with hardly any memory, right? It probably would load a little bit more faster if I had more memory allocation. So this is an extremely powerful functionality. I mean, I cannot stress more. And that's the reason why I've spent so much time on Railgun, right? Started with the basics on how to use it, moved on to adding functions on the fly for existing DLLs, and then now adding altogether new DLLs and defining functions in them, okay? Let us quickly search for NetAPI. Now, exploits would come and go, but what we are really concerned is in post-exploitation what we can do. The best part is you can now write post-exploitation modules calling different APIs just you would in a C program running on a Windows system, right? This is the power Railgun gives you. That's huge. I think this is a longer video than I hoped it would be. I was expecting around 10 to 15 minutes because I know people lose patience and attention. Hopefully some of you are still around. This is definitely a deviation from the regular, kind of let's just use an exploit and quickly show a demo videos of Metasploit. Okay, let's set exploit. Let's go down to IRB and let's go ahead and run client.railgun.known known DLL names. And if you notice, Mpr is now added. What does this mean? Very simply, we can run client railgun.mpr.WNetGetUser, right? Nil and 15 and 50. Fantastic. We broke in as system. That is the username which we get. Again, I could just quickly migrate to a process owned by the admin user, which in this case is 204 explorer.exe. And I could just run the same series of commands by just calling directly the function name, right? There it goes. Oh, we need to go into IRB mode, and here we go, right? SecurityTube. Now, don't worry about the rest of the part. This is basically the null terminator, right? 00. And whenever you do buffer allocation via Railgun, it basically just sets everything to capital A's, right? Okay, fantastic. So what we've learned here is really path breaking in itself. Is on a compromised system in post-exploitation, we can load absolutely new DLLs. You could even ship DLLs on the remote system and do it. You could ship it, upload the file, and then load the DLL, which could be a bit noisy from an AV perspective. Or there are also techniques in which you can actually send the DLL as a payload and load it into the current process's memory and execute it from there, right? So tons of interesting things. Hope you enjoyed this video. This is part of the SMFE course and certification. please have a look at securitytube.net/SMFE for more details. Thank you very much and have a fantastic day.